Hello fellow Sapiens and welcome to Historic Thing. Take a moment to settle in, quiet your mind, and let this slow storytelling keep you company. Whether you're winding down for sleep, cooking, driving, or just working with headphones on. If you enjoy this kind of calm, science-based history, please like and subscribe. It helps this channel reach more curious minds and keep long-form learning alive. I'd also love to know how you use these episodes. Do you fall asleep to them, or listen while showering, or maybe during a late-night commute? If you drift off partway through, no worries. Timestamps in the description will help you pick up the story tomorrow. This is soft science, never wild speculation told humbly, and as always, stay curious, stay calm. Now, let's begin. If you place yourself in the deep past long before farming or permanent villages, before even the word Neolithic had any meaning, the first thing you would likely notice in the hands of our ancestors is not a polished axe or a pot, but a stone. It is tempting to dismiss that as a primitive beginning, a kind of trial run before the so-called real technologies of later ages. But the truth is far richer. Those early stones, chipped, shaped, and wielded with care, were not simple in their own context. They were revolutionary extensions of the body, signals of new ways of thinking, and perhaps most importantly, the foundation for everything that would come later. If we want to understand the first toolkit of humanity in the Neolithic, we must first acknowledge that this was only the most recent chapter, in a saga stretching back nearly 2.5 million years. The earliest tool tradition we know of, the older one, appears around 2,600,000 years ago in East Africa. These tools, often described as simple choppers, were river cobbles struck at precise angles to create sharp edges. Though they seem crude, they were carefully chosen and skillfully made, capable of cutting meat, breaking bones for marrow and slicing fibres. Their appearance across wide landscapes shows this was not an isolated accident, but a shared knowledge passed on, a technological tradition. By about 1,700,000 years ago, a new form appeared, the Acheulean hand axe. Unlike Oldowan flakes, these tools were symmetrical, refined, and required foresight and planning. They butchered more efficiently, dug soil and cut wood. Their spread across Africa, Europe and Asia shows not just a tool, but a lasting template, remaining dominant for more than 1 million years, likely transmitted by teaching. By around 300,000 years ago, when Neanderthals flourished in Europe, a new toolkit emerged, the Mousterian. This industry focused less on large hand axes and more on the levallois technique, a method of preparing a stone core so flakes of predetermined shape could be struck off. These flakes became scrapers, knives, or points, requiring careful planning and precise strikes. Archaeologists note how similar Mousterian flakes look across sites, suggesting a strong shared knowledge system. Each tradition, Oldowan, Acheulean, Mousterian, was not an isolated invention but steps in a continuum, each perfectly adapted to its time and environment. To call them primitive is to miss their ingenuity, for a hand axe was as indispensable to Homo erectus as a smartphone might feel to us today. When we speak of the Neolithic toolkit after 10,000 BCE, we should remember it did not spring from nothing. The sharp edge of a flake had been discovered more than 2 million years earlier. The shaping of stone into standard forms was mastered with hand axes, and the planning of complex strikes perfected in the Mousterian. Each chipped edge carried the accumulated memory of countless generations. These tools extended the reach of the human hand, gave access to hidden calories, and offered survival advantages against predators. They were humanity's first experiments in becoming more than flesh, the first signs of innovation that would eventually lead to polished axes, sickles, pottery, and architecture. Yet a haunting question remains. Was this progression inevitable, or could humanity have stalled with only flakes and hand axes? We cannot know, but what these tools show us is profound. They were not only about physical tasks, but also reshaped human thought itself. Every flake struck was a decision, every surviving tool a frozen memory of intention. Tools became the first durable archive of human ideas, embedding thought into matter and outlasting their makers. They were survival, culture, and cognition combined, the earliest signs of a trajectory that would shape the human story. Archaeologists studying Acheulean hand axes have marvelled at their symmetry, calling them the first objects of design. Unlike the opportunistic flakes of the Oldowan, hand axes reveal attention to both form and function. their teardrop shapes replicated consistently across continents. Such shapes required holding a mental template, a capacity for projection that later enabled cave paintings and architecture. The Mousterian industry added another leap, with the Levallois-prepared core method demanding multiple careful strikes before releasing a flake. Though frustrating if a mistake was made, Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens practiced it repeatedly, showing patience and the existence of communities where knowledge was taught and transmitted. These were not isolated experiments, but part of a long continuum of innovation. The millions of years before the Neolithic were not a static prologue. Tools trained human cognition in planning, repetition, and shared learning, making later inventions possible. The Neolithic toolkit was not a beginning, but a culmination. Each new innovation resting on earlier breakthroughs, echoes of ancient hands striking stone. When the Younger Dryas ended and the Holocene began about 10,000 years ago, the climate stabilised after tens of millennia of wild swings. Glaciers retreated, seas rose, and new forests, grasslands, and river valleys emerged. For humans, this stability meant predictability, and with it came unprecedented diversification of tools. Hunters in northern tundras crafted lighter microliths, while Levantine groups developed grinding slabs and mortars to process seeds and nuts. In East Asia, polished adzes and chisels appeared, adapted to dense forests. These innovations were practical responses to shifting environments. As the mammoth steppe vanished, old hunting strategies no longer sufficed. Tools bridged memory and necessity, carrying old skills into new ecological realities. Although change was gradual and regional, the Neolithic marks a threshold because experiments became enduring traditions sustained for centuries. Regional identities were now expressed not only through art but through stone itself, with microliths in Britain distinct from polished axes in China, yet all rooted in the same post-Ice Age transformation. This diversification was not only about efficiency. Many Neolithic tools were more labour-intensive than their predecessors, with polished axes taking days to make compared to minutes for flakes. Such investments signalled a new relationship with the land, where durability and repair mattered, and workmanship sometimes carried aesthetic pride. Life's tempo shifted from endless pursuit of herds to rooted negotiations with landscapes, seasons, and resources. The Holocene allowed humans to trust that valleys of barley or forests of game would still exist the next year, enabling broad-spectrum adaptation. The Neolithic toolkit thus reflects not just artefacts, but a fossilised trust in stability, a trust that grew into farming, settlement, and new ways of living. During the Late Ice Age, survival meant depending on a few high-calorie prey, mammoth and bison in North America, reindeer and horse in Europe, gazelle in the Levant. But as glaciers melted and ecosystems fragmented, people turned to a wider variety of resources: fish, nuts, fruits, seeds, and small game. This broader diet demanded new tools: fish hooks, net weights, awls, grinding stones, and containers. Archaeological sites like Ohalo II in the Near East, just before the Holocene, show hearths, huts, and over 100 plant species processed with basalt mortars and pestles, while early Holocene Japan saw the world's first pottery, used not for farming but for boiling shellfish and acorns. With landscapes more patchy, mobility patterns shifted towards semi-sedentism. Heavy ground stone mortars signalled camps revisited yearly, alongside storage pits, hearths, and sturdier houses. Craftsmanship advanced with bladelet technology, producing delicate inserts for wooden shafts, caches of standardized blades, and early mass production. This innovation was encouraged by climate stability. Earlier warm interludes lasted centuries, but the Holocene endured for millennia, giving humans confidence to invest in durable technologies. Yet archaeology only preserves stone, bone, and charred wood. The perishable basketry, nets, clothing, and shelters are lost. The true breadth of early Holocene technology was almost certainly greater than the surviving record suggests, reflecting imagination meeting stability. This era also brought a profound shift in how stone itself was worked. For nearly 2 million years, humans struck flakes from stone for sharp edges, effective but brittle. Why then invest hours grinding stone smooth? Because polished axes, appearing independently across continents around 10,000 years ago, offered durability and efficiency over immediacy. Flaked edges, though razor-sharp, shattered easily, while grinding created denser, fracture-resistant edges. These were not quite as sharp but could withstand heavy pounding, ideal for the denser woodlands spreading as tundra retreated. Polished axes became humanity's first true woodworking tools, capable of felling trees, clearing brush, and shaping timber in ways flakes could not. Their emergence marks both a technical and philosophical shift, greater upfront effort for longer-term payoff. Early ground axes appear widely, evidence of convergent innovation rather than a single origin. In Japan, Jomon hunter-gatherers were already making them by 16,000 years ago to work hardwoods in coastal forests. In every region, the new tools signaled changing environments, new challenges, and the human capacity to adapt with imagination and patience. In Sahel, ground axes appear as early as 30,000 years ago, while in Europe and the Near East they become common around the 10th millennium BCE as forests spread. Their independent emergence across regions suggests grinding was not borrowed, but a natural response to new environments. Making one took over 20 hours of labour, evidence of more stable living sites where some could devote time while others provided support. Many axes were polished beyond function, decorated with grooves, and perhaps exchanged as prestige items, much like in Papua New Guinea where axes carried social value. Yet their practical payoff was immense. Hafted to wooden handles, they lasted months or years, powerful enough to fell trees, split timber, and open the door to woodworking. Polished axes transformed human interaction with landscapes. As Ice Age grasslands gave way to forests, people required tools for reshaping rather than simply for hunting. Across Scandinavia and Britain, worn axe edges and hafted examples at Starkar show they were workhorses for clearing forest and building shelters. In China's Yellow River Basin, polished axes appear with early village structures, while in Africa, axes from the Holocene Sahara suggest both woodworking and fire management. Their durability also changed labour patterns. Unlike disposable flakes, axes were heavier, not easily replaced, and tied to workshops and quarries where unfinished blanks and polishing stones reveal repeated skilled production. Beyond chopping, polished axes enabled carpentry, smoothing surfaces, squaring posts, splitting planks, even hollowing logs for canoes. These innovations reshaped mobility, trade, and architecture. Yet their spread was uneven. Some regions with sparse forests or softer woods did not adopt them quickly, reminding us that technology spreads when it fits ecological needs. In this way, the polished axe was both revolutionary and selective, reflecting adaptation rather than inevitability. Meanwhile, in the Levant around 12,000 years ago, people began exploiting grasses like wild barley and einkorn for food. To harvest them efficiently, they invented sickles, handles embedded with microliths arranged like saw teeth. These left behind a distinctive silica gloss, first recognised in Natufian sites in Israel and Jordan, showing intensive harvesting of wild cereals. Sickles reveal the first step toward domestication, as repeated cutting favoured plants that retained seeds longer. The design varied, wooden or bone handles with resin or bitumen, but all show wear from long-term use. By 10,000 years ago, sickles spread across the Fertile Crescent, appearing with toolkits devoted to harvesting. Sickles changed subsistence patterns. Harvesting required planning, storage, and collective labour, tying people more closely to landscapes. Archaeological sites show seasonal reoccupation, discarded blades in successive layers, and storage pits for surplus grain. Sickles also left a social imprint. Some were found in burials, hinting at status or symbolic significance. Their dual use extended beyond food, cutting reeds for mats and baskets that enabled transport and storage, linking harvesting directly to material culture. This sickle spread widely, adapting to local conditions. In the Nile Valley, gloss-covered blades cut reeds and cereals along floodplains, while in Europe migrating farmers carried the design into new settlements. In India, gloss evidence shows wild grass harvesting before domesticated rice. Handles were often decorated, suggesting sickles held aesthetic and ritual meaning alongside function. Ergonomically designed, they fit comfortably in the hand, maximising leverage. From modest beginnings, sickles became the bridge between foraging and farming, reshaping daily life, labour rhythms, and even social structures. laying the foundation for agriculture and civilization itself. Experimental archaeology shows how effective sickles were at harvesting cereals, cutting swaths of stalks quickly with little strain. This design, refined through experience, marked the first link in a chain of food processing technologies: threshing, winnowing, and grinding. Without sickles, this cycle could not have begun. The key breakthrough was not only harvesting, but also grinding, which cracked grains and transformed them into digestible flour, using tools like querns, mortars, pestles, and slabs. Unlike light flake tools, these heavy devices tied people to stationary living. Though grinding technology existed earlier, the Neolithic saw a massive rise, with basalt mortars, pestles, and querns showing deep wear from processing barley, acorns, lentils, and more. By 10,000 years ago, saddle querns became common, their sliding action reducing kernels to flour. This labour left grooves not just in stones but also in human skeletons, with arthritis in shoulders and elbows showing the toll of long grinding hours. These tools required effort but made grains nourishing, forming the base of bread and porridge. Heavy mortars tied people to particular spots, marking household areas within villages and sometimes even passed down across generations. When abandoned, they were often left in place or ritually broken, showing their deep connection to domestic and symbolic life. Grinding technology spread widely, adapted to local needs. In North Africa, mortars processed seeds before domesticated crops. In Europe, querns arrived with the first farmers. In East Asia, grinding slabs prepared wild millet and tubers long before rice farming. The principle remained universal: crush, grind, and release calories. These tools locked communities into cycles of planting, harvesting, and storing, changing labour divisions and shaping social structures. They also laid foundations for culinary traditions that endure, from bread to porridge. Grinding stones carried both benefits and burdens. They enabled larger populations, reliable food supplies, and the rise of civilization, yet anchored people to monotonous labour and dependence on grains. Their grooves whisper of resilience and constraint, of bodies bent daily over slabs. The soundscape of Neolithic villages was defined by the scraping of querns and pounding of pestles, rhythms that may have bound communities together. Yet grinding also brought health costs. Dust-filled homes, teeth were worn by grit and bread, and meals were both nourishing and abrasive. Still, the payoff was immense. Grains ground into flour could sustain families far more reliably than hunting or gathering, turning survival from gamble to routine. Grinding stones were not only for food, they also processed pigments and minerals. Red ochre residues show they served ritual, decorative, and symbolic roles as well. Communities adapted these tools to local resources. Basalt mortars in the Levant lasted generations. Sandstone and granite versions in Europe were faster, and East Asian slabs reveal early millet use. Even in the Americas, grinding stones for maize arose independently, proving this was a universal solution wherever seeds or tubers became staples. Grinding also raised the issue of scale. What began as household work expanded with village growth, requiring larger volumes of grain to be processed. This pressure foreshadowed rotary querns in later times, though Neolithic societies relied on mortars and saddle querns. These tools were humanity's first true food processing machines, powered by human muscle. In excavations, grinding stones are often left in place, sometimes cracked or richly buried, symbols of their intimate role in survival. Hoes and adzes marked the next leap. Hands alone could not cut dense earth, so people extended their strength with wood hardened by fire and tipped with stone. Digging sticks broke packed clay, opened seed holes, or lifted roots, while the cross-bladed adze scraped soil and shaped wood. Ethnographic parallels show their versatility. One tool could dig, chop, or smooth. Polished adze blades survive better than wooden shafts, with wear patterns proving they dug soil, cut roots, and cleared ground. Many were resharpened repeatedly, shrinking with long use. These tools altered ecosystems. Digging sticks opened soil for seeds, while adzes cleared woodland for sunlight. This was ecological editing, managing plants before full farming. In Southeast Asia, adzes also shaped timber for longhouses and canoes, linking cultivation with settlement. Their labour was immense, but it reflected new priorities. Investing work now for food later. Symbolically, adzes appear in burials, suggesting status, and in Polynesian tradition, they held spiritual power. They were more than tools. They embodied faith in reshaping land. By the end of the 10th millennium BCE, hoes and adzes were quietly transforming human life. They allowed not only cultivation, but also timber shaping for durable houses. Polished adzes made carpentry possible, their edges sharp enough to cut beams and posts. Sites like Lepenski Vir and Satalhoyuk reveal houses with fitted timbers and rectangular floor plans. In Central Europe, longhouses stretched 30 metres, demanding vast amounts of lumber. Without polished adzes and chisels, this carpentry revolution, anchoring people permanently to landscapes, would not have been possible. Woodworking went beyond houses. Wooden bowls, handles, fish traps, and joinery with mortises and pegs show advanced craftsmanship. Carpentry required coordinated labour, not solitary effort, and experimental archaeology shows felling even a medium oak took hours with polished adzes. Still, these tools enabled complex architecture, food traps, and symbolic wooden posts in burials. Ultimately, the adze was not just sharper, it was the key to permanence and community. With it, forests became raw material for culture itself, reshaping survival into settlement and daily labour into civilization. Experimental archaeology shows how Neolithic woodworking looked and felt. Replica polished adzes could fell medium oaks with hours of steady work, their edges far more efficient than flaked stone. Once felled, the same tools smoothed beams or hollowed troughs, each swing embedding weeks of labour in every house. Beyond construction, evidence from Scandinavia and the Baltic reveals wooden fish traps with mortises and pegs shaped by chisels, proof of sophisticated joinery securing vital food supplies. Timber also carried symbolic weight, appearing in burials where posts framed graves, linking carpentry with ritual. The polished adze was thus more than sharper. It unlocked permanent architecture and turned forests into culture itself. Much of the toolkit, however, was organic and rarely preserved. Cords, nets, baskets, and adhesives underpin the stone implements we see today. Without bindings, an axe blade was just a rock. Without rope, logs could not be dragged. Evidence from sites like Lascaux and Ohalo too shows mats, twisted fibres, and cordage as early as 23,000 years ago. By the Neolithic, these skills were widespread, essential for hafting blades, weaving nets, and sustaining villages. Their absence in the archaeological record reflects fragility, not insignificance. Reconstruction experiments reveal how fibres were worked. Stripped willow or lime bark could be soaked, twisted, and turned into rope astonishingly strong, capable of hauling logs or stretching into fishing nets that fed communities. Adhesives such as birch tar and conifer resins secured stone blades under heavy stress, a chemical ingenuity predating laboratories. Traces of these residues on Neolithic points prove how central glues were to toolmaking. Fishing nets seen in waterlogged sites from Denmark to Japan allowed large-scale harvests and surpluses, reshaping settlement life. Fibre technologies also had symbolic roles. Cord impressions decorated early pottery, while woven mats served as flooring or burial coverings. These organic inventions multiplied human strength, extended community capabilities, and shaped cultural identity. Yet most of this soft scaffolding has vanished, leaving only hints that without it, the stone toolkit could never have functioned. Bone, antler, and ivory expanded this hidden toolkit further. Awls pierced hides, bone needles with carved eyes enabled tailoring, and antler harpoons hunted fish and aquatic animals with strength and flexibility stone lacked. Bone spatulas smoothed hides, antler tools shaped pottery, and ivory allowed fine carving. These animal-based tools show that technology relied as much on soft materials as on stone, with every hunt yielding hides, sinew, and bones recycled into implements. Finally, bone and antler tools blurred the line between hunting and technology. Antlers shed annually provided renewable resources, while tusks and bones could be reshaped or repaired after breakage. Workshops like Starkar in Britain reveal antler working debris, suggesting planning, apprenticeship, and specialization. Across Siberia, Europe, and North America, Such tools persisted from the late Pleistocene into the Holocene, showing how universal this reliance was. The Stone Age was thus not only about stone, but about exploiting every durable material, scavenging and recycling nature's bounty into a versatile, evolving toolkit. In Africa, where ivory from elephants and hippopotamuses was common, artisans created functional yet beautiful items. This shows that using animal bones for tools was a global habit, not isolated. Wherever large animals lived, their bones became as important as stone. The so-called Stone Age was not only about stone, but about improvisation, with every material nature provided, with bone and antler as equal partners in survival. When the great Ice Age beasts disappeared around 10,000 years ago, hunters faced smaller, faster prey. Spears, once effective against mammoths and bison, became less efficient. This forced the rise of lighter weapons such as arrows, barbed points, and bows. The bow and arrow represented a leap in efficiency. Small projectiles loosed rapidly with speed no hand-thrown spear could match. Sites like Stellmore in Germany reveal preserved shafts with flint tips, and in North America lighter projectile points emerged at the same time, marking a new hunting era. Barbed points made of bone and antler refined hunting further, allowing arrows to lodge securely in prey. Waterlogged sites from Denmark to the Great Lakes reveal barbed antler points likely used for fishing, fowl, and small game. These tools reflect growing specialization, where no single weapon sufficed for all prey. Hunting shifted away from massive communal hunts to smaller stealth-based strategies. Hunters carried lighter projectiles, caches of arrows, and perhaps quivers, sometimes even coating tips with poison, showing inventive flexibility. The atlatl or spear thrower also shaped this period. Acting as an arm extension, it allowed darts to be hurled with greater power and range. Decorated examples appear across Europe, Asia, and the Americas, showing widespread use. For centuries, the atlatl coexisted with the boar, each suited to different prey. Long-range power for larger animals, rapid fire for smaller ones. This overlap shows humans layered technologies instead of replacing them outright, always adapting to circumstances. The bow shifted raw material use as well. Arrowheads became smaller and thinner, but not all required stone. Ethnographic parallels show bone, antler, or hardened wooden tips also worked. The bow democratized hunting, since arrows could be carried in bulk, reducing risk if some were lost. Archaeologists distinguish arrow wounds from spear wounds in animal bones, neat punctures sometimes clustered, evidence of volleys. In North America, bison bones show such marks, while elsewhere arrows served for small game, proving that hunting became more constant and diversified. Social consequences also followed. Bows allowed younger or less physically strong individuals to hunt effectively, broadening participation and reducing reliance on expert spear throwers. By the early Holocene, bows spread widely across Europe, Asia, and Africa, while the Americas retained both bows and atlatls for centuries. Environmental variation shaped choices. Bows excelled in forests, atlatls on open plains. This proves prehistory was not a uniform march of progress, but a patchwork of solutions. Examples like the Holmgard bows from Denmark, carved from elm 8,000 years ago, show remarkable craftsmanship and refinement. Earlier still, Stellmore's preserved arrows reveal mass reindeer hunts 11,000 years ago. In Africa, possible evidence stretches even further back, with tiny points from Sibudu Cave in South Africa, around 64,000 years ago, hinting at early archery experiments. These finds suggest archery was a global development, emerging through both cultural transmission and independent invention. The bow transformed human hunting by emphasizing stealth, precision, and repeatability over brute force. Knowledge of woods, sinew strings, fletching, and modular points formed a complex system of interdependent technologies. While not universally adopted, spear traditions remained in some regions, the bow expanded human options. With it, hunters mastered accuracy, patience, and volume of fire, signaling a new philosophy of survival. From the quiet twang of strings in post-glacial marshlands to archery traditions today, the revolution of the bow and arrow continues to echo. As Stone Age technology evolved, the bow and arrow embodied mastery of materials, physics, and cooperation. Originally a hunter's tool, it extended human reach into forests, marshes and skies, though its origins remain uncertain, whether born of a sudden spark or layered insights over millennia. At the same time, rivers and coasts offered vital resources. Though early scholars once thought aquatic mastery was late, new evidence reveals diverse fishing kits by 10,000 years ago. Japan's Jomon culture produced some of the world's earliest hooks around 23,000 years ago, proliferating after 10,000 years. Some were barbed or gourd-shaped, revealing adaptation to species and environments. Net weights found alongside them suggest fishing as a collective activity tied to seasonal rhythms. In Mesolithic Europe, sites along the Danube show large-scale sturgeon harvesting, while northern Europe preserved wooden fish weirs that funneled fish passively. In Africa, serrated bone and ivory harpoons appear in early Holocene contexts, devastatingly effective against large fish or aquatic mammals, and widely distributed across regions like the Congo Basin. Fishing strategies were diverse: hooks for patient angling, lines for deep pools, nets for schools, harpoons for larger prey, and basket traps for passive overnight capture. These methods spread risk across seasons, providing resilience during climate shifts. Rivers and coasts offered reliable food, encouraging some groups towards sedentary lifeways before agriculture. The labour of carving barbed harpoons, polishing hooks, and braiding long cords shows long-term investment, while carved hooks may have been heirlooms. Fishing knowledge, where to place nets or when to spear migrations, was passed through teaching, embedding these tools in cultural memory. Much of this technology is lost. Wooden traps, cordage, and woven baskets decayed, leaving only fragments like stone sinkers or hooks, the punctuation of a vanished text. Yet these tools were as vital as axes or grinding stones, forming parallel traditions of innovation. Along coasts of Scandinavia and the Baltic, shell middens reveal repeated seasonal fishing and even seafaring, with dugout canoes hinting at ventures beyond rivers. Spear throwers adapted for water also appear, with barbed darts suited for striking fish in shallows, requiring long practice to master water refraction. Fishing thus demanded both technology and education. Aquatic resources also became trade goods. Marine fish bones appear far inland, suggesting dried or smoked fish were transported through exchange networks. This required processing tools, scrapers, drying racks, and woven containers, rarely preserved. Experimental archaeology shows the strength of reconstructed nets and sharpness of replica hooks, proving Stone Age fishing gear was highly effective and refined, not primitive. These invisible tools, hooks, nets, harpoons, fed families during lean seasons, supported settlements, and fostered cooperation that paved the way for later farming communities. Evidence from early Holocene Natufian sites in the Levant indicates that perishable containers played a vital role in daily life. Large stone mortars, too heavy to move, suggest that food was processed in place, requiring portable vessels to transport finished products like parched grain, roasted seeds, or cracked nuts. These containers were likely woven baskets, sometimes hardened with pitch or clay, and complemented by leather bags, as suggested by figurines and wall paintings from sites like Sat al-Hoyuk. Ethnographic parallels and early fibre fragments from the Caucasus, some dating back nearly 30,000 years, indicate that humans had already mastered twisting plant fibres into cords, making nets, bags and baskets inevitable well before the Neolithic. Unlike perishable containers, pottery was durable and transformed human life. The earliest known pottery comes from East Asia, with shards in southern China dating to about 20,000 years ago, and Japan around 16,000 years ago. These early vessels, often deep for boiling plants and small animals, were initially developed by foragers rather than farmers, emphasizing innovation in food preparation over agriculture. From East Asia, pottery spread slowly across continents, appearing in Siberia around 14,000 years ago, and the Near East by 8,000 to 7,000 BCE, with Europe adopting it during the 6th millennium BCE. Adoption patterns varied based on local needs, mobility, and subsistence strategies. Pottery offered durability, allowing vessels to be placed directly on fire, cook grains and simmer bones, effectively extending human digestive capabilities. It softened foods, removed toxins, and facilitated nutrient extraction, benefiting children and the elderly. Storage in pots enabled communities to preserve grains and liquids, smooth seasonal shortages, and accumulate surplus, setting the stage for economic specialization. Pottery's fragility prompted innovations like adding temper materials to clay, reflecting some of humanity's earliest experiments in material science. The development of pottery also spurred craft specialization. Early vessels were thick-walled and uneven, but within a few generations, potters produced thin, evenly fired containers, suggesting apprenticeship and dedicated artisans. Firing required control over temperature and time, eventually leading to covered pits, stacked firing chambers, and fuel management. Functional diversity of pots, from storage jars to pouring bottles, indicates increasingly complex diets, including boiling broths, fermenting grains, and possibly early beer production, which transformed both foodways and social life. Fire itself was deeply integrated into Neolithic life. Beyond cooking, fire hardened wood, fractured stone for tools, prepared adhesives, and enabled controlled landscape management. Evidence of repeated burning in settlements suggests intentional uses for renewal or clearing. Fire shaped social organisation, from hearth-centred domestic architecture to labour coordination for tasks like annealing stone. It extended tool durability, preserved food through smoking, and even left byproducts like ash, used in cleaning or pest deterrence, highlighting fire's multifaceted role in daily routines. Together, pottery and fire reveal the ingenuity of Neolithic communities. Fire acted as a constant partner, enabling cooking, crafting, storage, and environmental management, while pottery provided durable containers that transformed diets and social practices. Perishable containers, although rarely surviving, were equally essential, showing that much of human creativity remains invisible. The Neolithic toolkit, from baskets and leather bags to pots and controlled flames, reflects an intricate interplay of experimentation, technology, and social organisation that underpinned the rise of settled human life. The Neolithic mastery of fire transformed everyday life. Axes were hardened in flame, sickle grips reshaped in embers, and pots baked to withstand boiling. Fire, while seemingly ordinary, was the most sophisticated instrument humans had, shaping tools, diets, and social routines. Alongside fire, another less visible but equally transformative technology emerged: threads and textiles. For millions of years, hominins relied on hides and furs, which were heavy, stiff, and limited by animal size. After the last ice age, humans began twisting fibres into thread and weaving cloth, creating flexible garments and containers that far surpassed the limitations of raw hides. Though early evidence is fragmentary, impressions in clay, charred scraps, and tools like spindle whorls and loom weights, these artifacts indicate that spinning and weaving became routine by the Neolithic, enabling linen, wool, and nettle textiles for clothing, storage, and protection. Textile production was systematic and specialised. Spindle whorls controlled yarn thickness, while loom weights enabled upright weaving of continuous cloth suitable for garments, draping, or wrapping. Woven textiles provided lightweight, adjustable, and replaceable clothing, extending human adaptability into wet or challenging environments. Beyond practicality, textiles carried social and cultural significance. Finer yarn and labour-intensive cloth implied value, and decorated spindle whorls suggest craft identity. Weaving may have subtly redefined status, community membership, and human ingenuity, quietly entering daily life one twisted fibre at a time while setting the stage for trade networks, social hierarchies, and household labour organisation. Textiles also functioned as structural technologies beyond clothing. Woven sacks, nets, and cords enhanced food storage, foraging efficiency, and tool construction, multiplying human productivity. Evidence shows weaving was a recurring breakthrough across the globe. Loom weights and charred flax in the Near Eastern Europe, fibre impressions on East Asian pottery, and twined plant fibres in Peru all attest to independent developments. The warp and weft logic of thread may have even influenced building practices, linking the architecture of textiles to human structures. In essence, weaving, like fire, was a hidden but foundational technology, quietly reshaping the human toolkit and daily life, while leaving behind only subtle traces for archaeology to uncover. Textiles played a crucial role in Neolithic homes, not just as clothing but as a form of environmental engineering. Hides provided insulation but were bulky, while woven mats and hangings lined walls, covered floors, and blocked doorways to retain heat. Houses with textiles allowed smaller fires and extended comfort into lean seasons. Weaving thus connected households, bound communities through shared labour, and laid the foundation for one of humanity's oldest industries. Alongside textiles, polished axes, adzes and chisels enabled the first truly permanent constructions, marking a shift from temporary shelters to structures intended to last generations. Archaeological sites like Jericho and Çatalhöyük reveal the scale and precision of Neolithic construction. In Jericho, massive stone towers and encircling walls required coordinated labour and specialised tools, while Çatalhöyük's dense, roof-accessed homes demanded constant maintenance with axes, adzes, chisels and grinding stones. Timber frame longhouses across Europe, some over 20 metres, show how polished tools allowed people to understand wood behaviour, brace structures and maintain permanent settlements. Even finer tasks, plastering walls, shaping decorative grooves or weaving cordage, required specific tools, highlighting the interplay between technology, domestic life and architectural planning. Neolithic tools also held symbolic and ritual significance. Some axes and sickles were miniature, excessively polished, or deliberately buried, suggesting roles beyond labour, as identity markers, teaching objects, or spiritual vessels. Depositions in pits, rivers, or underhouse thresholds indicate offerings, territorial markers, or protective rituals. The materials themselves, from colourful greenstones to carefully shaped woods, were chosen for aesthetic or symbolic value. Tools thus functioned in dual dimensions, practical implements shaping the physical world and conceptual anchors, shaping social, spiritual and communal life. Regional variations of Neolithic toolkits reflect adaptations to local environments. In the Levant, grinding stones processed cereals, while Southeast Asian adzes cleared forest for housing. Japan developed fishing technologies like bone hooks and harpoons. Africa combined stone, bone and wood tools for grains and hunting, and the Americas used obsidian, ground stone and barbed hunting implements. These toolkits coexisted, showing that technology was shaped by the dialogue between people and place, rather than following a linear progression. While organic tools are often lost, the diversity evident in surviving artifacts illustrates a web of parallel problem-solving, with communities sculpting stone, bone, wood, and fibre into solutions for their unique ecological and social landscapes. Ground axes and other Neolithic tools were far more than interchangeable objects. They reflected the environment, seasonal cycles, and social choices of their makers. Toolkits acted as ecological fingerprints, adapted to local resources. In the Pacific, shell and coral tools complemented stone where good rock was scarce, supporting maritime life, canoe-making, and woodcraft. In the Andean highlands, volcanic mortars and pestles processed tubers like potatoes, demonstrating regional innovation. These variations reveal that the Neolithic package was never uniform. Toolkits were mosaics of possibilities shaped by local diets, landscapes, and labour demands. Even within villages, households and communities used different combinations, underscoring diversity over standardization. Production of tools was highly skilled and socially structured. Standardized forms of groundstone axes, flaked blades, and other implements indicate deliberate training, often transmitted through face-to-face apprenticeship. Wear patterns in bones suggest gendered divisions of labour, with women frequently engaged in grinding, weaving, or scraping, and men in heavier tasks like felling timber or quarrying. Microscopic analysis of flakes distinguishes expert work from novices' attempts, hinting at a continuum of learning. Communal labour was common, whether moving heavy grinding stones, weaving rope, or hafting tools, blending survival with social cooperation. Daily life, teaching, and knowledge transmission were inseparable from tool production. The transition from stone to metal was gradual, layered, and culturally mediated. Early copper use began as ornamental or aesthetic objects, with stone continuing as the primary tool for centuries. By the 5th millennium BCE, copper axes and chisels appeared, often mimicking stone forms. Bronze later offered superior durability, yet stone persisted in many regions as functional, symbolic, and ritual objects. Polished stone axes remained heirlooms or offerings, even alongside metal tools. Adoption of metal varied regionally. Anatolia and the Balkans embraced it early, while Britain, Ireland and Northern Europe continued large-scale stone tool production, sometimes exporting axes over long distances. Stone tools also retained specialised roles long after metal arrived. Different stone types were chosen for sharpness, toughness, or aesthetic qualities. Flint for cutting, diorite for durable axes, obsidian for precise blades. Even with metal, stone endured in ritual context, niche applications, or where resources were limited. The decline of stone was not abrupt, but a slow narrowing of function, layered across generations. Each tool, from polished axe to finely retouched flake, embodies human adaptation, labour and social knowledge. The last stone axe did not mark a sudden end, but a gradual evolution, leaving echoes of 2 million years of tool-making that continue to resonate in daily life. Every knife, hammer, or woven bag we use today traces back to the ingenuity of people thousands of years ago. The continuity lies less in the material, stone, bone, metal, and more in the enduring human relationship with tools. From flaked blades and polished axes to early baskets, pottery and cords, these implements allowed humans to cut, carve, carry, store and survive. Fire, too, remained central, shaping diets, bodies, and routines, while textiles, from twisted plant fibres to woven cloth, connect Neolithic craft with modern fabrics. Tools were not just objects, but companions, bridges between thought and action, shaping how humans lived, planned, and imagined possibilities. Neolithic tools also carried social meaning and structured labour. Production required skill, apprenticeship, and communal effort. Gendered patterns emerge in wear and bone studies, suggesting women often handled grinding, weaving, or scraping, while men managed timber, quarrying, or heavy work. Children learned through observation and practice, creating small flakes and incomplete tools. Knowledge transmission was embedded in daily life, and each tool embodied hours of labour, instruction, and shared human rhythm, linking survival with social cohesion. The transition from stone to metal was gradual and culturally mediated. Early copper appeared as ornamental objects, with stone continuing as the primary workhorse for centuries. Bronze later offered durability, but early metal tools often mimicked stone forms. Polished stone axes persisted in many regions for functional, ritual and symbolic purposes, sometimes exported across long distances. Stone remained vital where metal was scarce, while different stones were selected for sharpness, toughness or aesthetics. The decline of stone was a slow narrowing of roles rather than an abrupt replacement, showing continuity and adaptation over millennia. The legacy of the First Toolkit extends beyond survival to imagination, teaching and identity. Shaping stone or weaving fibres trained minds to think ahead. Making and sharing tools fostered communal learning and authority. Tools became markers of status and identity, from axes and grinding stones to modern knives, chisels and surgical instruments. Our language still reflects this heritage. Words like cutting edge and hammer out ideas echo millennia of human experience. The First Toolkit lives on in our bodies, habits, social networks, and imagination, reminding us that every new invention continues the timeless impulse to shape the world with what we hold in our hands.